Midnight on Beacon Street by Emily Ruth Verona, a love letter to classic slasher films. An average rating of 2.85 on Goodreads, but I gave it 5 stars. Let's talk about why. Roll the intro. Hello friends, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. My name is Elise, and this is my mystical spooky bookshelf. And today, as I had stated in my new-ish intro, I'm going to be talking about Midnight on Beacon Street by Emily Ruth Verona, and I'm going to explain why I think it's a 5-star book. So the premise of this story is it follows Amy, and Amy is a 17-year-old high schooler. She's a babysitter. She's very reliable, and it's just kind of like a normal October night in 1993. That's kind of the premise of this story. And we kind of go through the night as it unfolds, and we go through the night in 3 different points of view in this book. So the first point of view we have is Amy, and then we have the point of view of Ben, and Amy is babysitting Ben and Mira. Those are the 2 kids of Eleanor Mazinski. That is the mom who she is babysitting for on this October 15th night. And it kind of goes through their evening and how it goes from a normal, everyday October evening to a slasher film, basically. And there's different things that go on throughout the night. They're very subtle changes in the mood. And one thing I can understand if someone gave this a low rating is it's kind of a slow burn in terms of thriller, in terms of what happens. It's very character driven. That's something that I love. I really like character-driven stories, but I can understand that's not for everybody. So when I say it has a 2.85 star rating, I can understand that perspective, because if you're looking for something that's very action-packed and not so quiet and unassuming, this might not be for you. But if you're someone like me and you really enjoy character studies and like character-driven stories, then this will definitely be for you. So, like I said, it's 3 different perspectives. The one perspective is Amy, the second perspective is Ben, and then we go through flashbacks with Amy. So the thing that confused me at first was why we kept going back and forth between Amy as a 17-year-old and Amy as an 11-year-old. But really, that kind of builds the story of Sadie, because Sadie is a prominent character towards the end of this story. She used to be Amy's babysitter when she was 11. And after, she wasn't Amy's first babysitter. She was Amy's second babysitter, I think. Her first babysitter's name was Nancy. And after Nancy went off to college, her parents decided to hire Sadie. So I think what Emily was trying to get at with including chapters of Amy interacting with Sadie was to give the reader a sort of insight on Amy and Sadie's relationship. Because when you're in the flashbacks with Amy and Sadie, you can tell that it's a little bit strained. There's something that's not quite right about Sadie, but the reader can't really put their finger on it. At least I couldn't, or I couldn't at first, but then as we kept progressing through the story, I understood why Sadie was included so heavily in these flashbacks. Because Amy, her perspective is mainly going through the night and like going through her normal babysitting routine, basically. And it's just showing her as a character. She's narrating her night and what she's going through. And she's trying to be the best babysitter that she can be. And I keep losing my train of thought today. I don't understand why. Okay, I'm sorry. I keep losing my train of thought. I think today is it's just one of those days where I'm having a hard time articulating how I'm feeling about a book. I've noticed I go through phases where I'm really articulate with how I feel about certain books, but then other books it's just like I don't know how to explain why I think this is so good, even though I did really enjoy it. And I think I listened to the audiobook, and I think that really helped me enjoy it more. I might not have enjoyed it as much if I had read it. I really did enjoy the audiobook though. Like, the narrator of the audiobook was great. I can't remember her name, but she did a really great job. And I also liked that whoever produced the audiobook, they added spooky music to it too. So that kind of added to the vibe of like, okay, this is kind of going towards a normal night turning into a slasher. That's kind of how it felt. And with Amy, it's her perspective of her going through her normal night, like I said, but there's little things that are going through Amy's brain, and she keeps thinking that this isn't right. Like, there's certain things in the night that are going wrong, and she's not understanding why. And I think the biggest premise of this book is that there are a series of burglaries that are happening in this town right now, and Amy's kind of feeling on edge. So I think that's where her apprehension comes from, because Eleanor has gone out on a date and she's very clear, lock the windows, lock the doors, don't let anyone in. And Amy has these rules in her head, and we understand why Amy has these specific rules, and she has a certain hardness on herself because she has panic disorder. And she also, I think, has generalized anxiety too, and that can cause a person to be very hard on themselves. So I think that's another reason why when we get Amy's perspective, we are understanding why she's feeling so apprehensive, because she's just trying to not mess up this night because she is so hard on herself because of her mental health disorder. And I think another thing that adds to the depth of this book is the fact that Mira and Ben and Eleanor are a family that ran away from an abusive situation with Eleanor's husband, boyfriend. I don't think they were married. They might not have been. I think it was her husband, now that I'm thinking about it, but it wasn't really explicit. But that's another piece that gets put into the puzzle as to why Amy is she wants everything to be perfect, because she knows that this family has already gone through a lot of hard stuff, and she doesn't want to be the one to bring them another hardship. And I think that might be where people get a little lost in the book, probably, because of the different perspectives. Because when we're in Ben's perspective, it's sort of going through the night backwards. Like, the very opening scene is Ben staring down at a dead body, and we don't know who the dead body is. And that is him going through his 6-year-old brain, trying to process what's happening. And then the beginning, after that, we go through Amy's perspectives first. And we go back and forth between Amy, Ben, and 11-year-old Amy. And I really think that what loses most people is the very heavy character building, because we each get a character build based on who's narrating the story at the moment. So we get Amy's character when she's 17. We know that she has panic disorder. We know that she is a perfectionist. We know that she hides herself from society, and she's very scared, and more than just scared, she's just anxious, and she is having trouble like fitting in and really hard on herself as a result. And we know about Ben when he narrates his chapters that he's just a little kid. He doesn't really know what's going on, and he's just trying to process the trauma that he's been through that he doesn't really understand, because he was really little when his family left the abusive situation. And I think Ben's perspective is important because it adds childhood innocence to the story, and we kind of see the night through his perspective, and we see it going backwards chronologically. So like the whole thing with this book is Emily, the author, is setting up the reader to get to that moment where there's a dead body at midnight, because that's when it happens. It happens at midnight. And we go through those different perspectives to try and build up the story, to understand how did we get to this murder, and who was the one who did the murdering, and why did they do the murdering. And the how of who did the murder is revealed towards the end, and the why of the murdering, in my opinion, it seemed like self-defense. And so at the end of the book, we understand that the person who is doing these break-ins is Sadie, and that's Amy's old babysitter. And Amy, out of an act of self-defense, an act of getting egged on by Amy because Sadie was bullying Amy, basically, towards the end of the book, saying that Amy's a coward and that she can't take care of anyone, and that why is she a babysitter. And Amy is just really worried about why Sadie is acting like this, because when we see them interact when Amy is 11 and Sadie is, I'm assuming, 17, we see that Sadie has weird, quirky character traits. Like, she seems nice in that fake nice type of way. Like, she's nice in that, like, mean girl fake nice. And when we see her interact with Amy, it's kind of almost condescending. And I can understand why Sadie is the antagonist at the end. It's a really different slow burn perspective, because you have all of these characters getting built up and all these pieces that are getting put together of things that go wrong throughout the night. So, like, one of the first things that goes wrong is, I think someone's knocking at the door, and Amy's scared and she doesn't know who it is, but the first person knocking ends up being their elderly neighbor, Mr. Danner, and he's coming over to give them a piece of mail that had ended up in his mailbox on accident. And that's like the first eerie thing that goes wrong, is that first knock on the door that scares Amy. And then the second thing that goes wrong during Ben's chapter is he answers the phone and nobody's there. Nobody's on the line. And this one kind of threw me off a little bit, because the person who was on the phone was his dad, and we didn't figure that out until the third wrong thing of the night happened, when their dad, Mr. Mitchell, knocks on the door, and Amy opens it again, thinking it is Mr. Danner, but really it wasn't. It was their dad. And that was kind of confusing, because we know that he is abusive, but I didn't understand why he came to the door and didn't do anything. Like, he came to the door, but he didn't, like, he wasn't really being super antagonistic, But he was like, I'm coming back for my kids and stuff. And it kind of just seemed like out of nowhere that he was barging in and wanting to take Ben and Mira. But I think for the atmospheric purposes of the story, it was just going to show that there's something wrong with this night. Like, it's not a normal night. Like, I think it was showing that he was following Eleanor and following his family, trying to get his kids back, even though he was abusive. And I think it just goes to show, don't answer the door for strangers, too. That was another thing that I think was a big lesson. Because Amy was kind of beating herself up for answering the door a second time. Because she was like, I just thought it was Mr. Danner. I didn't think anything of it. And sometimes, when you have an anxiety disorder like this, you just have things that really cloud your judgment and you're not really sure why. Like, sometimes you feel like your brain is foggy, or like you just can't go through the motions like a normal person. And I think when you do something like this, Amy was just being really hard on herself for it, even though it's natural that she would answer the door thinking it was Mr. Danner. But obviously it wasn't. It was Mr. Mitchell. And it just also was kind of confusing to me because once Mr. Mitchell leaves, that's it. He doesn't come back. He doesn't ring the phone again. He just is kind of this loose end in the story. And I think that's also another reason why people might give this a low rating. But I think it didn't hinder me giving it a 5-star because I could understand that Emily had included the abusive father detail kind of to make you think that maybe Mr. Mitchell was the one who was going to kill someone, that maybe he was going to kill Amy and take the kids, because in the very beginning, like the first chapter that you listen to or you read, you see that the dead body is a young woman, but Ben isn't describing who it is really clearly because he's traumatized, but the reader gets this clue that they're wearing a ring. And when you're going through the story, Amy is the one who wears a ring on her finger that she plays with like a little fidget toy. So when I came to the part with Mr. Mitchell, I had thought maybe the story was going to take a different turn and that Mr. Mitchell was going to murder Amy and take his kids, because that's kind of how the first chapter set it up. But that's not where it went, like at all. It kind of took a left turn after that, because once Mr. Mitchell leaves, Amy kind of goes to the living room, and this is where it's like there's different references to different movies in this book, and that's why I say it's kind of like a love letter to slasher movies, because Amy is really interested in film, and she loves watching horror movies and slashers, and she brought it up in a really good way. Like, she says that even though she has panic disorder, she likes the predictability of horror films, and she likes the predictability of the scares that they have, which I can totally understand. Like, before I met my husband, I really didn't like horror films at all, but after meeting him, and he kind of like coaxed me into it slowly, I can understand Amy's perspective, because with horror films, it's very cut and dry. It's like, this is the killer, this is what happens, this is who dies, and there's a lot of tropes in horror films, and I think that if someone has panic disorder like Amy, they find comfort in predictability, and I understand that now. I totally understand that. Because I also do understand that horror movies are predictable, and watching them, I feel the same way as Amy, even though I didn't understand it when I was watching them, because I hadn't read this book yet, and I didn't know Amy's character. But looking back, I do understand where she's coming from with that, because there is a certain comfort in knowing that there's certain scares that are going to happen, like on cue almost. And that's kind of like where this night is going. Like, Amy's watching Halloween when she's babysitting, and when she has like the fourth bad thing that goes wrong in the night. And it's really interesting the way she watches the films, because she looks for certain scenes that she finds comforting. And I find that really relatable, because I also do that with books and movies, and I just found that super relatable. So, like, the fourth thing that goes wrong is Amy's boyfriend, Miles, comes to the door, and she makes sure she opens the window, or she opens the curtain up crack first and looks in it, and then she realizes it's Miles, and she lets him in. But the one thing that's bad about Miles coming is that he brings along his brother, who's like a major... He's not a good person. I don't know how to say it without saying a bad word, but he's a bad person. And then he brings Sadie, and Sadie is dating Patrick. That's Miles' brother's name. And this is where we kind of understand Sadie's whole purpose in this story, because there's something weird about Sadie. Like I said, she's like this weird fake nice. She's very condescending, and you don't understand why she's with Patrick. But that's like the fourth bad thing that goes wrong, is that Sadie and Patrick disrupt their night, and they're really loud, and Amy has to kick them out. And I think that was like the tipping point for Sadie, because we learn that Sadie is the one doing these break-ins, which I was like, wow, that's a big plot twist. I wasn't expecting that to happen. And then we also learn that Amy is the one who kills Sadie. So Sadie is like egging Amy on, and she's calling her a coward, saying she can't take care of anything. And Amy kind of just pulls up her bootstraps and is like, I'm not going to let you hurt these kids, because Sadie has a knife, and Sadie has a knife and a baseball bat, but I think she puts the knife down and then picks up the baseball bat, and she acts like she's going to hurt someone. She acts like she's going to hurt Ben specifically, which I thought was interesting, because she's a babysitter. So it just seems weird that she would want to harm these children. But Amy like pulls up her bootstraps and like stabs Sadie, and I thought that was the best part of the book. Like, it was very intense. Like, there was a bunch of build up, but once it got built up to that slasher tier of the climax, I could totally understand why someone would give it 5 stars and why I gave it 5 stars, because I think the build up is worth it. So like at the end, Amy stabs Sadie, and then we realize that was her who fell on the floor, and we realize she stole Amy's ring, and that's why she was wearing it. So Amy was the one who did the killing. She was the final girl. And it's really funny, because the book kind of closes out with, they go to Mr. Danner's house after the break-in, and Eleanor is like really grateful to Sadie, even though Sadie doesn't really see herself as a hero. She kind of talks herself down and says, oh, it's all my fault, I'm gonna go to jail, I murdered someone. But really, it was self-defense. Like, this woman broke into your house, and you protected those kids. So really, Sadie's a hero. Or, not Sadie, Amy's a hero. Sadie was crazy. I don't know what's wrong with Sadie. But Eleanor tells Amy that she's, like, really proud of her and stuff. And I loved all the characters in this book. There wasn't even one character that I didn't like. I mean, even though I thought Sadie was crazy, I thought she was a good choice for the villain, because I really didn't see it coming. I could tell there was something wrong with Sadie, but I couldn't understand what was wrong. But I understand why she was the one who doing the break-ins, and why she targeted this house, because I think she has like a vendetta towards Amy for some reason. And I really enjoyed the kids, Mira and Ben. I didn't talk about Mira a whole lot, but Mira was definitely a good character, and I definitely want to make like when I listen to books or when I read books, I kind of go through my mind and I think, how can I make them into a custom doll? So I'm thinking for Amy, I'm going to customize Victoria to look like Amy, because she kind of has the same, like how I picture Amy's face to look. But I'm going to have to dye Victoria's hair brown because Amy has brown hair. And I definitely want to customize like a junior high doll to look like Mira, because I really liked Mira a lot. She was a really good character too. And I enjoyed Ben. I enjoyed his perspectives and his chapters, even though that was one of the reasons why some people didn't like it. But I think overall, with this book, even though it was hard for me to articulate how I was feeling, I think it's definitely a 5-star for people who like character-driven narratives and who like slow burn slashers and who like a really big payoff at the end. Like all this build up and atmosphere, and then to have it come crashing in and being like, this is what's going on. This is why it's worth it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Midnight at Beacon Street, and I totally recommend that you read it. It came out last year, so it's still relatively new. So I found it on Libby, but I'm sure you could find it on Audible or Kindle, or you could buy a paperback copy of it. I'm sure it's still being sold. But thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye, friends!